Haven's POV.
My phone buzzed against the wooden floor near the mirror of the dance studio. Again. I'd lost track of how many times I'd heard it go off. I knew who it probably was. A small twinge of guilt flickered through me as I ignored it again, but I kept at my cool down stretches without moving to check it, and pushed the negative feeling to the side. I was alone in the studio. Class was over, and the few dancers who had attended had already left, making their way back to their apartments or heading out for a late breakfast with other members of the company. They had extended a courtesy invitation to me, as always, and as always, I turned it down. I didn't come to California to make friends. I came to dance, to improve, to boost my chances of becoming a principal somewhere, eventually. Plus, forging connections and making friends remained hard for me, even as an adult. It didn't help that the one and only friend I'd made as a child had hurt me, kicking me when I was already down. I swallowed back my anger and grabbed my things, heading out of the studio without even taking my ballet shoes off. This was the last class for this pair anyway, since they were now broken through, so I didn't care if they got ruined by the cement. I knew I should feel bad about standing Wesley up, but I couldn't bring myself to. Once the shock of seeing him wore off, I remembered. That man had once been the boy I thought was my friend. I remembered how I had reached out to him when the dust had settled, and he'd shut me out. Given me the cold shoulder. I owed him nothing. Least of all a cup of coffee at a cafe, where I'd have to sit across from him at a tiny, intimate table and stare at his handsome face and listen to his deep voice the whole time. No. That would not happen. Because, as angry as I was, I also couldn't deny the instant attraction I'd felt when my eyes landed on him. Or the way my body responded when he'd grabbed my hand. Or how my core had clenched when my eyes landed on his biceps, straining against the sleeves of his t-shirts. Or... "Oh my God, stop it, Haven," I muttered under my breath, adjusting the strap of my bag on my shoulder. "He's an ass. He proved that to you 11 years ago." I stopped when I reached the door of our apartment building, and played with my keys for a second, biting my lip as I glanced down the street. I could just pop down there for a minute, tell him what I really thought of him, and then... I shook my head and opened the door of the building, then headed up the stairs. The sound of raised voices greeted me, Maya's higher-pitched mezzo voice overlapping with a deep, growly baritone. A voice I had heard only once, but I knew without a doubt who it belonged to. Wesley fucking Stone. I squared my shoulders and turned the corner as he said, "Just let me talk to her, Maya." For the millionth time. "If she was here, I would let you," Maya retorted, her arms spread in the doorway to block Wesley from entering. At his feet was a small brown box, and his hands rested on his hips, his hair slightly tousled and his face wearing a scowl. I'm not sure how he knew I was there, but he turned to look at me before I could even make my presence known. His eyes traveled over my body. Twice. The first time, he was clearly checking to make sure I was all right, and then the second time, his gaze went slower, lingering on my exposed shoulders and arms and my neck. I held back a shudder at the warmth in his eyes when they returned to my face and locked him with a steely, ice-cold glare. Maya's eyes darted between the two of us, her arms falling to her sides, her hair bouncing with each switch of her head. Wes's lip curled into a smile, and then he glanced at Maya. They engaged in a silent battle of wills, and then Maya flinched a bit and said, "Right, well, I'm going to go get the groceries we need. I'll see you later, Haven." "Wait, what?" I asked. My hand reached out to grab her as she passed, but she sidestepped me and kept walking like she had a fire under her ass. "Maya!" I called after her, but she just threw a little wave at me over her shoulder without looking back. And that's how I found myself alone with Wesley Stone. Wesley fucking Stone. I stood there as he stared down at me, his gaze intense and burning into me. But I stared right back. He did not intimidate me. Sure, he cut a large and imposing figure as he stood in the small narrow hallway, and sure, he had to be at least half a foot taller than me, if not more. And sure, those broad shoulders and muscular arms that pulled at the fabric of his dark green polo might have been scary to others. But I wouldn't let him affect me. Or at the very least, I wouldn't let him know he was affecting me. Because damn it, he was. But not in the intimidating way. In a very, very different way. I looked at the open door and back at him and then sighed. Unfortunately, I needed to put my polite hat on. Invite him in. Hear what he had to say. He was already in my building, so might as well go the whole way. My cheeks heated at that thought, and I ducked my head and mumbled, "I guess you can come in." He bent to pick up the box at his feet, and then followed behind me, and I tried not to imagine his eyes looking at my ass and my leotard. Tried, and failed. He set his box on our small table in the dining nook, and I went into my room without a word, crossing my fingers that he'd stay put. I tossed my bag on my bed and grabbed my oversized off-white cardigan and threw it on over my black halter leotard and black skirt. Even though the ballet skirt came to my mid-thighs, it was sheer, and I knew it hid little. And I'd seen the looks he'd given me both at the lake and in the hallway. I sort of liked them, sort of enjoyed the little flips my stomach did when he gave me them. But I'd never admit that to anyone. Ever. "What are you doing here?" I asked him as soon as I walked back out of my room. "Why didn't you come to coffee?" "I had class," I told him. His head tilted to the side, and he shook his head. "I don't buy it." I gestured to my attire, my bun, and my point shoe-clad feet. "Really?" "I mean, I clearly see you just came here from a dance class," he said. He pressed his fingertips on the top of the table, making the veins in his forearms bulge and drawing my attention to the tattoo on his left bicep I hadn't noticed before. I squinted at it, trying to make out what it was, but his voice drew my attention back to his face. "But I don't buy it as your excuse. You told me you had class last night, but then you agreed anyway," he continued. "So, I can only conclude that, for some reason, you decided you didn't want to see me after all. So tell me, Haven, why didn't you come to coffee?" My jaw ticked and my eyes itched. How dare he? How dare he come to my home and demand to know why I didn't want to see him? As if he didn't know. As if he wasn't the one who pushed me away all those years ago. The fire inside me burned hotter than I'd ever felt it, and something pushed forward, something I could no longer hold back. "What makes you think I would want to spend any time with you?" I spat in anger. He flinched back in shock at my vitriol. We were friends. Friends? I said with a sarcastic laugh. Friends? God, if we were friends, then I'd hate to know how you treat your enemies. "What do you mean?" "Fuck you!" I yelled. "How can you stand there and ask me what I mean? You know exactly what you did to me." His brow furrowed, and he opened his mouth, then closed it as he looked at me in confusion. I took a deep breath and tried again, explaining it to him slowly, like I would to a child. "You abandoned me," I said, my voice raspy and weaker than I wanted it to be. "I had no one left except you, and then you were gone, too. I was alone, with new parents, a new life, one I didn't even want because I had been just fine where I was, and I didn't even have the one person I knew I could lean on either. If I had known how to reach you, I would have written," he said, his voice almost shaking. "I tried. They wouldn't give us any information about where you'd gone, about the people who adopted you," he added, taking small, slow steps around the table. I rolled my eyes. "That's bullshit, and you know it," I replied. "I wrote to you. I gave you my new address. And then I waited. And waited. And fucking waited for you to reach out to me. And you never did." "Haven," he murmured as he continued walking closer to me, shaking his head, his hand reaching out to me. It was only then I realized I was crying, that hot tears were falling from my eyes. I held my hand up, and he stopped in his tracks, his jaw clenching and unclenching as he held himself in place in the middle of my apartment. I wiped my eyes in a frenzy, turning away from him, intent on rebuilding my carefully constructed walls, before I looked at him again. I couldn't let him see me cry. I wasn't that girl. The girl who cried in front of people. And especially not him. Not after what he did to me. "I never got a letter," he said from behind me. I would have written to you. If I had known where to send it, I would have written to you, Haven." I glanced at him, and he was watching me, and I couldn't understand his expression. "When did you send it?" he asked. "After I was adopted," I told him. "I had your address memorized." I showed the letter to my mom, Melissa, and I asked her for a stamp. She said she'd take it to the post office for me. I crossed my arms and fidgeted with the sleeve of my sweater, hiding my hands so Wesley wouldn't see them shaking. "I swear to you," he started saying, his voice low but sure. "I swear to you, Haven, I would have written back to you. I never would have let you think you were alone. I never got a letter." I watched him out of the corner of my eye, and he looked around the apartment, a longing, wistful look on his face. When his eyes landed back on me, he sighed and said, "I'm sorry. I'll go." I nodded, and swallowed, and continued to watch him from my spot with my back mostly turned on him. When he reached the doorway, he paused and pointed at the box. "I brought those for you. You can do whatever you want with them." And then he left. And I cried. I cried harder than I had in a long time. I covered my mouth with one hand as the other used the wall to keep me from collapsing to the floor, somehow feeling even worse than I had when I thought he'd ignored me.
Haven's POV.
Once I had composed myself a bit, I pushed off from the wall and walked to the table where the box Wes brought with him sat. I glared at the offending box. Why he'd left it behind was beyond me. I didn't want it. I wanted nothing to do with him. I lunged for it and snatched it off the table, then stomped to the door, ready to take it out to the dumpster behind our building. But the force of my movement sent the box flying to the floor as it slipped from my grip, sending the contents tumbling out and across the plank flooring. I froze in my tracks, staring down at pages and pages of letters, my 9-year-old handwriting in the glittery purple gel pen ink sparkling back up at me. My throat tightened, and my heart thumped against my ribs. I knelt down to the floor and gathered the pages, taking care to not bend or crinkle any of them. With slow, precise movements, I stacked them together, putting them in order from the very first letter I'd sent him to the last, while also placing the 4 letters in his handwriting behind those. The last item on the floor was one of the few pictures I'd sent him, one of the glamour headshots Shirley had done for the auditions and the ballet competitions I was supposed to take part in that spring. It was a little wrinkled and slightly faded, but otherwise recognizable. I clearly had too much makeup on in it, making me look a little older than the 9 years I was at the time. I laughed to myself, remembering Jack complaining that I looked way too grown up for his liking. Another tear fell down my face, but I blinked back the rest, holding back the new torrent of emotions threatening to overtake me. I stood from the floor and walked to the living room, sitting on the plush couch, where I began my deliberate reread of my letters to Wesley. With each letter, the ice in my veins melted, and I felt my lips beginning to smile. I laid each letter side by side as I finished them, creating a small timeline of one half of our story on the coffee table in front of me. By the time I got to the final 4 letters, the ones written by Wesley, doubts were forming in my mind. Why would he keep all of these if he didn't care? But that question raised more questions, questions I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answers to. I pressed on, picking up the 4 letters from Wesley and reading them. I read through each of them once, and then again, and then again. My lip quivered as I set the last one down, and for the 3rd time that day, tears made their way to my eyes and down my face. I buried my face in my hands, pressing my palms against my eyes to stem the water trying to escape. The 4 letters I'd just read collided with my memories and my convictions about who Wesley really was. Everything I thought I knew was jumbling around in my head, mixing together until I couldn't tell up from down, right from left, or true from false. I stood up abruptly and walked to my room to grab my phone from my bag on my bed. I pulled it out and unlocked it, then paused, staring at all the missed calls and ignored texts Wesley had sent me that morning. I groaned. I wanted to run my hands through my hair. But I couldn't because of the perfectly slicked back and tight bun I had in my hair from class that morning. I paced in front of the foot of my bed. Back and forth, the boxes of my point shoes creating a gentle tapping noise on the plank flooring of my bedroom. I didn't want to. But I knew I had to. I stopped dead center and dialed my mom's phone number before I could change my mind. Ring. I popped my left foot up to the side, pushing over the top of my point shoe to stretch out my arch. Ring. I straightened my leg and brushed it out in a degage, then closed it in front of my right foot into 5th position, my head tilted down to watch my legs and feet. Ring. This is stupid, I muttered to myself, and I almost hung up, but the line clicked as my mom answered. Haven. Sweetie. Hi. Hi, Mom. I murmured. How are you? How was rehearsal? Wait, no, it's Saturday, no rehearsals, right? I gave her a wry chuckle. Yes, it's Saturday. But I still went to class this morning. Isn't it optional? Yes, but you should be resting. You're going to wear yourself out, sweetie. That's what Peter said too, I told her with a roll of my eyes. Well, he's your coach. Director, I corrected, rubbing my forehead. Whatever, she said, and I pictured her waving me off like she always did. My point is, he knows what he's talking about. You should listen to him. Right, I whispered. So it's decided? You'll skip class next Saturday? I sighed up at the ceiling, holding the phone down against my neck as I prayed to no one for patience. Sure, Mom, I gritted out finally. Oh, good. I would hate to see you burn out or get injured when your career has barely started. I swallowed and nodded, even though she couldn't see me. So, what else is new? Have you made any other friends besides your roommate? Kaya? Maya. Right, she said. No. Not really, I admitted. She made a huff of annoyance on the other end, then said, well, Lennox stopped by the other day, and dash. And I'm sure you told him I said to fuck off, right? Haven Wainwright! I heard my dad shout, and I winced, realizing I must be on speakerphone. I know you broke up with him, but really, he was a nice young man, and… Yes, I said, antsy to get past the issue of Lennox. He was nice enough, but there was nothing special there, I explained for the millionth time. I would not explain to them how he wanted things I couldn't give to him. Not without giving up my own dreams, my own plans for the future. I would not explain to them how he tried to control every aspect of my life when we were together. He was the son of a family friend, and I didn't want to mess up that relationship for my parents. Well, dash. That's all I'm saying about it, I said in a firm voice. Now, I swallowed and pulled my cardigan around me tighter. I wanted to ask you something, I said in a timid voice. The voice I reverted to whenever I asked anyone for anything. What's up, Buttercup? Dad asked. Do you remember the letter I gave you? I asked slowly. The one I asked you to send, right after you first adopted me? The one you wrote to that boy? Mom replied. Yeah. What about it? I was just wondering if you ever sent it? I asked. I told you I sent it, baby, remember? Yeah, I don't know. Being in California just got me thinking about it and dash. He would have written back if he really wanted to. We talked about this when it happened 11 years ago. He clearly wasn't really your friend. You just thought he was, since you'd never had a real one before. I swallowed at her words and bit back the retort on the tip of my tongue. No, I know, I paused and peered out the door of my bedroom towards the letters on the coffee table. Maybe they got lost? I suggested. All 20-something of them, she replied. I mean, sure, if it had just been one, I could understand that maybe it got lost. But you wrote to him so many times, and never got a response. It couldn't have gotten lost every time. The front door opened and Maya stepped in, her hands holding 2 large, reusable grocery bags. She looked around the apartment in caution before closing the door. Wes, she mouthed, and I shook my head at her. Like I told you then, Haven, I sent it. I sent all of them. He just didn't care enough to write you back. Don't you trust me? I inhaled silently and looked down at my feet. I could feel Maya's eyes on me as she pulled the groceries out of the bags, so I closed the door slightly to avoid her stare. Of course I do, I mumbled, even though my stomach clenched at my words. Okay then, she said. Now, let's just leave that awful, awful boy where he belongs, in the past. I nodded again, and said, okay. Was there anything else you needed? We're shipping a care package soon, so you better get your last requests in now. No, that was it, I whispered. Bye, Mom. Bye, Haven. My dad echoed her farewell and then the line went dead. I tossed my phone back on the bed. Torn. I felt so torn. I didn't know who to believe. Why would he lie to me about not receiving my letter? He'd always been honest with me. Even in his first letter, he was overly honest. But why would my parents lie about sending it? What would they have gained from cutting me off from my first and only friend? "Wanna talk about it?" Maya called to me from the kitchen. I bought wine. "It's 11 a.m., I said through the door. "It's 5 o'clock somewhere," she called back to me. I shook my head with a laugh. "Just give me a minute," I told her as I perched on the edge of my bed to take my shoes off. I stretched and wiggled my toes once they were free, and sighed at the sensation of not having my toes constricted by the wooden box anymore. I reached for the hole in the sole of my tights to roll them up over my ankles, but then Maya said, "You better not uncover those stinky ballerina feet." "I'll put socks on." "It doesn't help. Wash them or something." I groaned and went into the bathroom from the door in my room and quickly washed my feet to appease my roommate and her weirdly sensitive sniffer. "What's with the letters?" Maya asked as I joined her in the kitchen, and she handed me a glass of rose. "How is this already chilled?" I asked her as I pressed my nose into the glass to sniff it like she taught me. "Oh, that one was already in the wine cooler. I had forgotten it was there." I nodded and took a sip. "You're avoiding my question," she chastised. "They're mine," I told her. "Or, I guess, technically they're Wesley's." "Yeah, 'cause that's not confusing," she said with raised eyebrows. I maneuvered around the counter and grabbed one of them and handed it to her to read. She skimmed it at first and then her eyes went wide and she went back to the top and read it again. "You wrote this?" She held it up to show me the front as she spoke. "You wrote all of those to Wesley?" I nodded. "And he wrote you back? When you were kids?" "For a few months, yeah. I was 9 and he was 12. Wow. Yep." She leaned back into the corner of the counter and looked at the letter again. "So why'd you guys stop?" I leaned my elbows onto the counter and set my wineglass down. "That's the problem," I told her. I always thought," I bit my lip and shook my head. "But now I don't know what to think." As much as I would love to say I understand, that entire sentence was rather cryptic, "So I'm going to need you to start from the beginning," Maya said as she topped off her glass of wine. I sighed. After I was adopted, I gave my parents a letter, and they said they would mail it to him so he would have my new address. He never wrote me back. But he claims he never got the letter. "And you spent all these years hating him because you thought he did it on purpose, and now you don't know what to believe?" I met her eyes and nodded. "My mom says she sent it," I shrugged. "Says she sent all of them." "Maybe she forgot? Or maybe they got lost in the abyss of the USPS?" Maya suggested. "It's possible," I said. "You don't think so?" I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal to her. We were friendly. But we weren't close. Not for lack of trying on her part. But I just never let anyone in. Not really. But this was supposed to be my fresh start. My new beginning. And I couldn't accomplish that if I didn't try. My relationship with my adopted parents has never been great, I confessed. Her eyes softened, and she leaned forward to grab my hand. "I'm sorry," she said. And somehow, I knew she meant it. "They didn't even want me to come here," I continued. "They wanted me to keep my core position in the company in Salt Lake so I'd be closer to home. They've never understood the ballet world, or even tried to be on the bare minimum, so they didn't get that being a soloist here was better than being stuck in the core forever in a big-name company." Maya nodded as she listened to me. I finally had to remind them I'm an adult, and that it didn't matter if they approved of this choice or not, it was mine to make. Then they tried to pull the whole "well, we won't help you move" bullshit, which didn't matter because Peter had already told me the company would cover all my expenses. Damn, I didn't realize they'd wanted you that badly. Maya exclaimed. Get it, girl. She lifted her hand for a fist bump, and I rolled my eyes but returned the gesture. Here's my 2 cents, Maya said, turning serious again. I don't know your parents, so I can't speak to whether or not your mom is lying to you. However, she continued, I do know Wesley. Not well, mind you, but he's the son of our mayor, and Levi knows him a bit. And while Wesley Stone may be many things, cocky, arrogant, and a lovable asshole among them, he is most definitely not a liar. With that, she downed the rest of her wine, set the glass in the sink, and walked to her bedroom, leaving me alone with my swirling and conflicting thoughts.
Wesley's POV.
I hastened to my truck as fast as I could. I needed to shift, but I couldn't do that in town. It was necessary for me to get into the forest first. Then I could link Reed and ask him to come get the car so I could leave it on the shoulder. My emotions were all over the place. I didn't know whether to scream or cry or laugh. The whole situation was too much for my Leakin to handle. Or me, if I was honest. As soon as I was far enough away from the town, I pulled over and called Reed, since I was still out of mind-linking range. What's up? I need you to come get my truck, I grunted. Okay, he replied. Where is it? I'll leave my phone in it so you can find it with the GPS tracker. Got it. You okay? No. I growled, and then I hung up. I threw my phone onto the passenger seat, then ripped my shirt over my head. Then I hopped out of the truck and ran into the trees before taking my pants off and leaving them in the dirt as I shifted into my Leakin. My claws dug into the dirt, and I had to hold back the howl threatening to break through my mouth. It hurt that she thought I could hurt her. But even more than that, it hurt to see her hurting. And she was so sure, so firm in her belief that I would do something so horrible as abandon her when she needed me the most. It gutted me. And I couldn't even blame her. I'd be mad at me too if I was her. And even though I knew there was a chance she'd think I'd abandoned her, to see it come to fruition was something I could never have prepared for. We'd spent over a year trying to find her, to find out her name and where she'd moved to. My dad had hired private investigators and even tried using a witch, but it was all to no avail. We should have tried harder. I'd always thought we hadn't done enough, but now I knew for sure. I knew for sure that it hadn't been enough. Some friend I was. No, I didn't even deserve that title. I was just a boy who broke her. I made it to our packed lands in record time and took a lap around the perimeter, staying under the cover of the trees. About halfway through, a light gray Leakin and a rusty-furred wolf flanked me, running slightly behind me. I acknowledged Sebastian and Nolan with a perfunctory nod, then kept on my path. It was a normal loop for me, one I ran almost every morning before our mandatory trainings. My friend and my brother ran with me in silence, not asking me questions or trying to talk to me at all. They both knew better. Seb might be an asshole, but he was more intuitive than he let on. And Nolan, well, he was just returning the favor. I finished my first lap and then started in on a second. But unlike that awful day almost 12 years ago, I didn't try to outrun my companions. I stayed in stride with them, letting their presence calm my rage. Even though it wasn't the same as the way a mate could calm me, the bond between the four of us was a strong one, forged not just because of our parents' friendship, but because of all we'd gone through at each other's side. I led us back to my house, glad I had moved out of the family suite in the pack house a few years ago. I did not want to see my mom or my dad right now. I slammed my front door open, not even caring how hard it hit the wall in the entry as I stalked through my house, still in my Leakin form. I heard the other two following me and then ducking into one of the spare rooms where they knew I kept extra clothes for them. Their muttering voices as they shifted and changed echoed in the otherwise quiet house, but I tuned them out as I pulled on a pair of gray sweatpants and a black t-shirt. I exited my bedroom and stormed back out onto the porch. I threw myself onto the porch swing, where I crossed my arms and sat pouting like a toddler. Being outside was a must, though. I couldn't stay cooped up in the small spaces in my little cabin. So, how did Coffee with Haven go? Sebastian asked as he leaned against the railing. I growled out in response. Nolan sat down next to me, leaning his forearms on his knees. That well, huh? Nolan said. She didn't show up, I grumbled. Ouch, Sebastian winced. She didn't show up, and when I went to their apartment to find out why, she said she wrote to me. She said she gave me her new address, and when I never wrote back because I never got the letter, I shook my head. She thinks I abandoned her, I said, my knee bouncing up and down. But you didn't, Sebastian said. Didn't I though? I asked. I may as well have. I should have tried harder. I should have realized sooner that something wasn't right. Then maybe we'd have had enough time to get her before someone else did. Wes, you didn't give up on her. You went to our parents and told them something wasn't right. You checked every day, no, every hour for an update on her. I shrugged at Sebastian's words. Did you tell her that? Did you tell her Nolan's parents tried to adopt her? No, I grunted. It wouldn't have mattered. She made her mind up. She thinks I'm a bastard, and she's right. Why do you care so much? What? I asked. Why do you care so much? Seb repeated. What do you mean? I mean you fucking shifted when you found out someone else had adopted her and that you would not get to see her. That you wouldn't be able to reach out to her unless she contacted you first. When you thought you'd failed her. Shifted. At 12 years old. What's your point? I asked. Seb threw his hands in the air, then gestured to Nolan as if to say, you try. What Seb is trying to say, Nolan began, is you've never cared this much about what a girl thought of you. No girl has ever affected you like this. Then Haven comes back into your life and one comment, one negative opinion from her, has you tearing yourself apart. Why? What makes Haven so special? His question, combined with his words from the previous night, had my spiraling thoughts halting in their tracks. There it was. The answer was staring me right in the face, taking the form of a 9-year-old girl with blue eyes and messy red hair, and morphing into the beautiful woman who took my breath away the night before. All this time, I hadn't even realized it. But the impossible, imaginary standard I subconsciously compared every other girl to wasn't impossible or imaginary, it wasn't even a standard at all. It was a person. Her. Haven. I don't know, but do you think she's your mate? Nolan asked. I considered his words. She was human. And I was an alpha. Human mates weren't unheard of, but they were rarely mates with an alpha. But there would be no way to know for sure yet, anyway. The mate bond didn't appear until both mates were 21. It's too early to know, I said. Her birthday is still a few weeks away. And then the next words left my mouth before I even had a chance to really think about them, as if they were the words that had been on the tip of my tongue, waiting to be said for 11 long years. But even if the goddess doesn't give her to me, I'm going to make her mine. I declared my intent with a determination I hadn't felt in a long time. I wanted her. Damn it, I wanted her. And not just because of her looks, although that was part of it, but because of who she was. I had already fucked up once in my life and almost lost her, so I would not let her go this time. Not without a fight. I knew what kind of man I was. I knew I could be the type of man she needed. My Lycan stretched in satisfaction at my words and my thoughts, and I didn't miss the smirk Sebastian gave Nolan. I'll only say this once, but you're right, I admitted to Sebastian, and his smirk morphed into a grin. I've never felt this for anyone else, and I don't want to let it go. Let her go. I want her. And what are you going to do about it? He asked. I opened my mouth and then closed it and then leaned back against the porch swing. Shit. I don't know. You should tell her, Sebastian said. About what happened? I asked. About the adoption? He nodded. And everything else, too, he added. She's not ready for that, I said. And I doubt she'd believe me. She didn't even believe me when I said I'd never gotten her letter. Seb sighed in exasperation, his eyes rolling so far back all I saw were the whites. Fine. Fine, he said, lifting his hands in surrender. Do it your way. See how it goes. I have a training to help run, so I'll see you later. He turned on his heel and stalked off, his head shaking as he muttered to himself under his breath. You're going to have to get her to like you first. Nolan and I both turned to find Maddie leaning against my open front door. I glanced at him and then at her and then around the front yard of my house. When did you get here? How'd you get into my house? What are you even doing here? I was already here, she said. No, I would have noticed you, Nolan said. Maddie chortled. You guys are so cute. How'd you get in? I asked again. Honestly, Wes, you need to be more aware of your surroundings. If I was an attacker, you'd all be dead already. She examined her nails casually. Also, you need better snacks. Tell me how you got into my house or I'll tell Dad about your belly button ring. She just shrugged. Fucking shrugged. Like she's not afraid of our dad when he goes into full alpha mode. Although, come to think of it, I don't think I've ever seen him go into full alpha mode on her. He just turns into a puddle. Damn, is that how I'll be if I have female pups? Why are you even here to begin with? I hang out here every Saturday at this time. You're usually at training or hiking or something, so no one is here. What? I do my homework here. I walked to the doorway, and she moved aside to let me look in. Sure enough, her textbooks were thrown all around my living room and her laptop was open on my coffee table. Why? I asked. I don't need the other teens to know I actually like school, she mumbled. Then she shrugged. And I like the quiet, she muttered, crossing her arms. I stared at her for a moment. I will buy you some snacks, Dash. Yes. If you tell me what you meant about getting Haven to like me again. Deal, she said brightly. I leaned against the frame of the door opposite of her. Please, elaborate on this whole getting her to like me again thing. That's the thing, Wesley. Getting someone to fall in love with you, that's easy. But getting someone to actually like you? It's a completely different game. But what's the difference? Oh goddess, Wes, no wonder you've had terrible luck with females, she groaned, pressing her fingers into her temples. You can love someone and not like them, she grumbled. You can? I asked with a furrowed brow. Well, she's pissed off, right? She's hurt, and she thinks you did something to hurt her on purpose, yes? Yeah, I growled, warning her away from that topic. So she doesn't like you right now. But she still feels something for you, otherwise she just wouldn't care at all. I thought about what she said, and she continued. It's the same for you, with your previous women. You didn't really like them, so it was easy for you to say bye to them when you realized it. Okay, oh wise one, how do I get her to like me again then? You grovel. But I didn't actually do anything wrong, I replied. You still have to grovel, she shrugged. I should have known you were going to say something like that, I muttered as I shoved off from the doorframe, heading into my house to begin planning to get Haven to like me. Nolan stood from his spot and followed me. Wait! Maddie shouted and ran to her school stuff. Here, she said as she handed me a piece of paper. What's this? My snack list. I glanced over it. Maddie, there are at least 30 things on this list. Selections, Wes. You have to have selections. Plus, I'm a growing Shilikin. You wouldn't want to deprive me, would you? She added, giving me her signature wolf pup eyes, and I caved. Fine, I'll have them by next weekend. Damn it. I was turning into a puddle just like my dad. I hoped I never had girl pups, because if I did, they would own me. An image of a tiny female pup with long red hair and big blue eyes running along the shore of the lake popped into my head, and I swear my Leakin let out a small whimper. What was that? Nolan asked. Nothing, I grunted. It was nothing. I cleared my throat and headed towards my home office. Let's go figure out how I'm going to grovel.